3 years ago, the elite's plan would have been unthinkable, an overhaul to the dollar so transformative, so earth-shattering, many thought it could never happen. But today, it appears to be a done deal. A dangerous plan is being rolled out across America, originally found on page 314 of a document from the desk of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. A scheme to enact enormous change to the appearance and value of our money, a complete and total overhaul of our financial system. A change that could impact the savings of millions of Americans, especially those with more than $2,500 in the bank. Just hours after the first mention of this scheme surfaced in the halls of Congress, the details were quietly redacted, scrubbed from existence. What was in the section that was erased? Today, investigative journalist Dr. Nomi Prins, famous for predicting the 2008 housing crisis, calling the lockdown crash of 2020, and exposing the nefarious connections between our nation's presidents and the Federal Reserve, reveals the full story. Dr. Prins will show you why the elites have chosen this moment in history to release their dangerous overhaul on an unsuspecting American public. It's a scheme backed by a handful of global elites, including the Gates Foundation, the Federal Reserve, the World Economic Forum, all 50 states, and even the White House, which is primed to put the final pieces of this plan into place this summer. A plan so radical it may seem hard to believe. Already, big banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo have started to implement it. And as you will see, they actually have no choice in the matter. Major retailers like Starbucks, McDonald's, and Whole Foods, owned by Amazon's Jeff Bezos, have tested the necessary technology, and Microsoft and Visa have unveiled plans that will help it all take effect almost instantly. In today's interview, Nomi Prins is going to explain exactly what she sees coming, why it could ultimately represent the elite's imminent endgame, and by the end of the conversation, she'll share exactly what you can do to escape the consequences of this new money plan, even potentially grow your savings with a step-by-step plan that she has come up with. Most people think inflation, war, and a currency collapse are the biggest risks to our financial system, but sadly, those problems don't even begin to explain what is about to happen in the months ahead. So if you've got any money at all in a U.S. bank account or retirement plan, or if you simply collect a fixed income from the federal government, please pay close attention, because you are at risk. The entire financial system is on the verge of a shock unlike anything that we have seen in decades. Those who take the critical steps today to protect their wealth will survive and potentially even thrive. Those who don't could be derailed. Hi, I'm Chris Hurt, and on today's show, we do have one of America's most noted whistleblowers. Famous for accurately predicting the 2008 housing crisis 2 years beforehand, calling the market meltdown in 2020, and exposing the truth about the Federal Reserve and America's most corrupt politicians in her best-selling book, All the President's Bankers. Today, Dr. Nomi Prins is here to warn the American public of a plan that she says will affect everything about our lives, from the way we work to where we vacation, how we pay our bills. And over the last few years, of course, Americans have been focused on turbulent energy prices, conflicts overseas, market manipulation by the Fed. But, Nomi, according to your research, all of those things really do pale in comparison to what we're here to talk about today. Welcome, by the way. Glad you're here with us.
Thank you so much. I think this is such an important moment in our history, and you are exactly right, Chris. The day-to-day lives of every man, woman, and child in America are going to be unrecognizable in the months to come. Between now and July 31st, a massive change to the very nature of our money is being rolled out by powerful people on Wall Street and in our government. It's going to change everything in ways that I would have considered unthinkable at the beginning of the decade.
So worse than what we've seen since the lockdowns of 2020?
Yeah, much worse. And to some, the plan being carried out by the financial elites, along with the White House and America's biggest companies, will seem unbelievable. But I have smoking gun evidence right here that shows that what we are here to discuss today is an unstoppable runaway train. And Chris, just so we're clear, what I have to share today, it's not a prediction about some far-off future event. It is actually playing out right now in real time. In fact, as I'll explain in a moment, I saw the first evidence of this plan before the pandemic. And again, I have documents right here showing dates, plans, everything.
Right. We'll get to some of those right now. But the point here is this is really serious stuff.
It absolutely is, Chris. Look, 2 years ago, we would have been called conspiracy theorists for even talking about this stuff. We might have been censored, kicked off social media, canceled even. But today, I don't care what anyone says. Not everyone will agree with what I have to share here. And frankly, I am used to that. Recently, I was actually uninvited from a meeting with the Congressional Committee in fear of what I might say or hear. And at this point, though, nothing can stop me from sharing this crucial message. Over the years, I have discussed all sorts of controversial matters with our elected officials, from reining in Wall Street to finding ways to use our nation's existing debt more efficiently to driving our American economy forward. So the critics can think whatever they want to, but this story, it is just too important and it is unfolding too quickly to keep quiet. Chris, I am about to expose here a dangerous plan that is being unleashed on you, on me, and on everyone across our nation by the Federal Reserve with the full backing of the White House and many of the most powerful corporations in America.
Companies that we've all heard of?
Oh, you have almost certainly heard of every single one of these. In fact, I can virtually guarantee you, and everyone in our audience here tonight, that they use their services every single day.
So, Nomi, are you saying that this plan is basically being hatched in broad daylight by companies being used by Americans everywhere, every day?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm saying, and right under our noses. And as I'm going to explain in a minute, it's being pitched as a good thing under the cover of a financial emergency. And it is being fast-tracked by the White House, the Federal Reserve, Bill Gates, and his friends at the World Economic Forum. And honestly, the way I expect this scheme to be sold to the general public, many are probably going to cheer it. By the time it's ready to be rolled out, Chris, many will actually welcome it with open arms. The government and the mainstream media will tell you that this plan will save the banks and the dollar. And in reality, though, it is just another power grab with dire consequences for your hard-earned savings. Your privacy and your free-flowing way of life could be totally turned inside out.
Okay, Nomi, forgive me, but let me go back for just a moment. You said savings will be at risk. Are you saying that, well, are stocks about to crash?
No, Chris, honestly, I used to expect a stock market crash. In fact, I wrote about it in my book, Collusion. But what we're about to see, it's actually far worse than a stock market crash. I'm not talking about inflation or a recession, a massive war, nothing like that. No, what is coming between now and the end of July will change everything about the way that we spend, borrow, save, and invest. Nothing will be left untouched. And that's why I want everyone watching to pay close attention to what I'm about to say, because every single American with more than $2,500 in the bank, in a retirement plan, even folks who simply collect fixed income from the federal government, will be affected. We are about to be tested in a way that no American born in the last 90 years has ever seen before. And confusion, fear, and even rage could be the result. And that's why my warning today, Chris, it's so critical. Think about this. Over the last few years, how many seemingly wild theories have turned out to be totally true? First, they said inflation was transitory, and then they promised that the Fed wasn't going to raise rates in any meaningful way. And now we are finding that America's banking system, which Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell called stable and well-capitalized, is anything but either of those two things.
Right.
I could go on, but I think that you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah, absolutely, Nomi. It seems like there's a troubling new truth or realization about the state of our economy that seems to get exposed every week, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the story that I'm here to explain, it's another troubling new normal that we're going to be forced to accept. And it could cause the biggest financial earthquake since 1971. And we'll still all be forced to adjust to it. Between now and the end of July, money as we know it could literally disappear.
Really, that soon?
You think I'm exaggerating it, probably. But this transition, it's It's already in motion. In fact, I have a pile of documents with me here today that prove every single part of it. The most dangerous plan in decades is right now advancing in our nation's capital. This bill, for example, and I want to show this to you,
Sure.
Chris. It's really important. This was put forth by Nancy Pelosi on the floor of Congress. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it just vanished.
It vanished. Just like that. Why?
Exactly. Or a better question might be, what was in that document that they didn't want us to see?
Right. I tell you what, let's pause here for just a moment, Nomi. Folks, if you are just joining us, hold on to your seats. This is important stuff here. We've got best-selling author and investigative journalist Dr. Nomi Prins, who is with us. She is telling us something strange is about to happen in America. And according to the documents that she's in the midst of showing us right now, between now and the end of July, everything about the way that we spend, borrow, save, and invest could change forever. So, Nomi, let's get back to this document here that you've just handed me. What is in it that they didn't want us to see exactly? And my next question to that is, how on earth did you get your hands on it? How'd you find out about it?
I'm very good at getting my hands on stuff. So I'm going to answer your second question first. Now, I spent 15 years working at the inside of our financial system with the likes of Chase, Bear Stearns, and Goldman Sachs. And even after I left those firms, I have spoken with members of Congress countless times over the years. So I have certain connections on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C. that most people just don't have. So through my network, I was able to get my hands on an unredacted copy of this plan with the full original language still intact. And I promise you, when I reveal what I saw, your jaw's going to drop. Mine really sure did. So if you dismiss this as nuts, though, I will not blame you. Nobody wants to believe that something like this big can happen, certainly not here in America. But as you're going to see, as the instability of our financial system becomes more and more apparent to the average American, no other outcome will be possible. And that's why, Chris, I insisted that we film this interview, and thank you so much for agreeing, because we must share what I have discovered as far and wide as possible, because that way, at the very least, the folks in our audience won't be caught off guard when events take a turn for the worse. And I hope that once we're finished here today, they're going to tell their friends and family exactly what's about to happen.
Yeah, well, we're very grateful that you're here to sort of hold our hands through this process, and you've certainly got our attention here. So let's go back to this plan here for just a moment that you're talking about. Can you tell us who they are, quote unquote, and I mean the people that are behind this all?
Sure, Chris. So I have spent the past few years connecting all of these dots. At the core of this plan is a multi-trillion-dollar scheme that's endorsed by the likes of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, the Federal Reserve, and even the White House.
All right, Federal Reserve, World Economic Forum, White House. So this one goes all the way to the top, apparently,
It
right?
absolutely does. And
Okay.
nobody is going to be immune from the widespread effects. And it is all set to become an instant reality between now and the end of July with help from Visa, thanks to this new troubling patent, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment.
Okay, so Visa is behind this. The IMF you mentioned, the Fed. We talked about the White House. Anybody else?
Yeah, the full list includes dozens of U.S. corporations, banks, and power brokers, and they're all scrambling to prepare for what's coming next. Some like McDonald's, Disney, Shake Shack, Starbucks, Panera, Walmart, and Whole Foods, they have already beta tested the first steps of this.
So they're already preparing for this right now.
They are, Chris. The first hint of this huge scheme, it happened during the confusion back in 2020. You remember seeing signs like these all over the place over the last few years?
Definitely, yes. Those were everywhere. Businesses all over the country temporarily stopped accepting cash, right?
Right.
But you know what? I haven't seen nearly as many lately. Those businesses aren't refusing cash anymore. I actually thought places like Starbucks and Walmart only banned cash for a short time. It was a health precaution, I think.
Well, so that was the story that the media told about it. They said it was to protect people. And in that moment, that all seemed perfectly reasonable. But I have found overwhelming evidence that there was another purpose. According to my research, it was a small bite, really, to see if Americans would willingly accept a total switch over from cash to a digital dollar.
So you're kind of talking about a test balloon, see how many customers they would lose, maybe.
That's absolutely what I think was one of their goals.
Well, was there another reason?
Yes. So I believe it was also a way for businesses to quietly put the infrastructure in place for this inevitable shift without raising suspicion.
And Americans never suspected a thing, really.
Right. Most just went along with the plan. They paid for everything with their credit or debit cards, and no one even raised an eyebrow.
Right. So, Nomi, are you saying a digital dollar is imminent? Is that what we're talking about? And if so, is it too late to push back on this idea?
As far as I can tell, this plan, it is a done deal. I'll tell you about a silver lining, though, in a few minutes. But yes, the dollar as we know it is being permanently dismantled in broad daylight right under our noses. And as I'm going to show you, major corporations like Visa, like Chase and others, they are feverishly building out the infrastructure that's going to overhaul our entire financial system. And before we're done here, I will even show you the very sneaky reason that the Fed and the White House will use to sell this plan to the American people.
All right, well, let me ask you, why haven't we heard about this before now? I mean, why is it that Nomi Prins is the only one that's talking about it?
Okay, well, I'm not the only one who has caught up on this dangerous plan, Chris, but conservative radio host Glenn Beck, he warned about this reset repeatedly on his show. Presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy, he knows what's happening too. And Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, he sees it too. In fact, it appears that he is the man behind the curtain, orchestrating the big push for a monetary overhaul worldwide. Take a look at this chilling quote from Schwab himself. This historic shift will change everything about our money. Most will be blindsided, but as with any plan pushed by the government, there are always folks who stand to lose everything. But then there are also folks who end up winning big. So if you take the time to prepare before it's too late, you could emerge on the other side wealthier than ever before. But Chris, if you don't take action, your savings could be derailed.
So it occurs to me that's a nuclear bomb that you just laid on us here, Nomi, because if you don't mind, I want to unpack this a bit. The first thing that I'm wondering is, have we here in the U.S., have we ever seen a reset like this before?
I'm so glad that you asked that question, because that is exactly where I was going to go next. You were ahead of me, as you sometimes are, Chris. And the answer, it is yes. Big financial resets like this, they have happened here in America 3 times before, and each time with the exact same result.
3 times?
Yeah. So back in 1907, for example, in reaction to a major financial panic, powerful bankers like J.P. Morgan and others, they united to quote unquote save the financial system. Does that sound familiar to what's going on today? Right? But in reality, the panic then, it gave the elites cover, which they took advantage of to pass dangerous new legislation, a reset of the financial system. And today, the law that they passed is considered one of the most infamous power grabs in our entire history.
Oh, explain to us then, why is that?
Well, because since it was passed, ordinary folks, everyone out there today has lost about 96% of the value of their hard-earned dollars. And I'm talking, of course, about the Federal Reserve Act, which formed America's central bank. The new law was such an immense power grab. The name of the Fed's founder, John P. Morgan, is on the door of what today is America's biggest bank.
Okay, you're talking about Chase, right?
Right, J.P. Morgan Chase, to be more accurate. I used to work at Chase. In fact, you've got to give credit to Mr. Morgan. He had no problem manipulating the world to make a buck. And the mastermind behind America's second financial shock, he was no slouch either when it came to changing the very course of history.
Is this another banker?
No, not this time. It was an American president. So let's just skip ahead to 1933. Smack in the middle of the Great Depression, the stock market plummeted 89%. Unemployment soared and more than 1,300 banks failed. So as confidence in the financial system cratered, President Roosevelt and his cronies, they rode to the rescue. And again, they used the crisis to their advantage. The legislation that Roosevelt signed into law was called the Emergency Banking Act, which actually shut down the Federal Reserve for 4 days, but it also gave the president new powers. At the time in 1933, our currency, the dollar, was backed by gold, and coins like these were popular. But FDR used his newfound power to sign something called Executive Order Number 6102. And that order, forced Americans to turn in their gold savings. In fact, and get this, Chris, the government gave savers $20.67 in cash for every 1 ounce coin they turned in. But once they had all of the gold, a great deception took place on the American people, because with the flick of his pen, Roosevelt revalued the price of that gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce, in effect stealing 41 cents on the dollar from every American who turned in their gold. Wow.
So tell me, why did folks go along with that order? I mean, if I picture myself back then, easy for me to do in hindsight, I'm still not sure that I would have turned in my gold.
Well, maybe you wouldn't have, Chris, but remember, when the government wants folks to do something badly enough, they carry a pretty big stick. And in this case, failure to comply with FDR's gold theft was punishable by a massive $10,000 fine, which was a lot at that time, or even jail time.
Right. So, I think you're helping me to see a pattern here, Nomi. I give you credit for that. Every time that there's a crisis that rears its ugly head, it seems that the elites step in and make sweeping changes to the money. And as a result, the fortunes of hardworking Americans are threatened. Am I right about this?
Yeah, you are right, Chris. And this is the exact same pattern that we've seen play out over and over again throughout history. If you wait too long in any of these scenarios, or if you just simply follow orders, your savings are gonna suffer. So you gotta look deeper if you truly wanna see the shape of what's to come, and you gotta take early action. If you do, you can not only avoid the worst of these money grabs, you can actually emerge wealthier than you ever imagined.
All right, well, that is what I want to hear. There is some good news here to share. When you put it that way, it doesn't actually seem like much of a choice at the moment. Now, you mentioned that this has happened a few times before. I think you covered two of them. Was there a third? What was the third example?
Yeah, so the last time that a huge crisis led to sweeping changes to the dollar was just over 50 years ago. It was a Sunday evening in 1971, and America was in the midst of the Vietnam War. And President Nixon, he interrupted the weekly episode of Bonanza to address the nation with a shocking announcement. He decoupled the dollar from gold. That's something I wrote about extensively in my book, All the President's Bankers. The titans of Wall Street, they were hurting from a run on the dollar at the time, and they wanted to make sure that the Fed could print more money if they needed it. And for Nixon, there was a simple and elegant way to make sure the money would be there. So he and the Treasury Secretary came up with a plan to stabilize the dollar.
Yeah, stabilize the dollar, which sounds like a good thing, right?
It does on the surface, but then the exact opposite happened. When the dollar was tied to gold, the average American had to work about 800 hours to afford a new Ford pickup, right? But since then, the time it takes to afford that has more than doubled. And the number of hours that it takes to afford the average house, well, that has skyrocketed as well. In San Diego, for example, homeowners work 77 hours every month to just put a roof over their heads. And in Miami, it's even more expensive. It takes a whopping 109 hours. And the FHA, they recently approved 40-year mortgages to give people enough time to even pay them off. And meanwhile, Americans have never worked more hours than they do today to service their own debt. So you can see why Nixon's decision was just such a massive disaster.
Yeah, and I had no idea the FHA had started offering 40-year mortgages. That's news to me. So the price of everything literally seems to be spiraling out of control.
Right. And not only did Nixon's abrupt decision cause our dollar to plummet, but cutting the dollar loose from gold, it also had another really important effect. It turned the U.S. dollar into what's called a fiat currency.
Right, which means it's essentially backed by nothing.
Nothing. That's right, Chris. This move essentially unleashed the Federal Reserve to throttle up the printing press and accelerate the expansion of U.S. money supply.
Which is a huge problem. Even today, we're seeing it.
It's a bigger problem today, and most Americans, they've got no idea. So they feel the pinch, right? But they're not sure why it's happening or really what to do about it. Because you don't have to be a historian or a mathematician to understand what's going on here. It's simply the result of supply and demand. The more of something that exists in the world, the less it's worth. So just take a look at this chart.
Yeah, trillions in new debt since 1971.
Trillions upon trillions. And get this, Chris, have a look at just the past 3 years. At the end of 2019, federal debt was just $23 trillion. And look at where it is today. All of this debt, it's going to be left to our children and to our grandchildren to have to deal with. And of course, in the history books, they're going to claim it was all done for our own protection.
Right. You know, it's no wonder that our spending power has fallen so much.
Chris, it's fallen 96% over the last 100 years or so. And most people, look, everyone, we know things are getting more and more expensive, but we've adjusted so remarkably well.
Well, what do you mean by adjusted?
Well, so in the 1970s, many households decided to become dual income households in order to make more money, to survive. And in the 80s and 90s, we leveraged up with debt, meaning we borrowed our way from paycheck to paycheck to make ends meet. And now we have gotten to the point where the average American needs to take out a 7-year loan to buy a car. And that's if they can afford to drive it at all.
Right. And your point is that this has all happened since Nixon took the dollar off, decoupled the dollar from gold.
Yeah, that's right. And the changes that we've seen, though, they are nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what is coming next. Over the years, every last bit of value has been stripped from our money. First, it was gold. Then it was paper. And now the last physical dollar could soon be printed. And after that, our money could disappear altogether to be replaced by a new type of dollar that's going to permanently change the function of our money from a simple medium of exchange and a store of value to a much more Orwellian new technology that few are going to understand at first.
I want to be positive, but I have to tell you, I'm not liking the sound of a lot of what I'm hearing right now.
I don't like it either, Chris. I mean, that's why I'm so glad that we're here talking about it, because on the surface, this is another plan that is being spun as a way to protect Americans and the economy. But it's going to be nothing more than another elite-driven coup in disguise, driven by the likes of Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and a handful of lawmakers in Washington, D.C.
Well, I think I'm following everything that you're saying here, Nomi, and I appreciate it. And in each example that you've shared with us, Federal Reserve Act, Roosevelt's gold confiscation, if you want to call it that, the Nixon shock, it does seem like every time it does mean more power, more control for the government, less wealth and control for Americans like you and me, folks on Main Street out there. So when you put it that way, how can I don't know what else to say. It's just daunting. It's intimidating. And I can see why so many people in these situations just sort of take it. What are they supposed to do? They don't do anything. They're just overcome by fear. I can feel it myself. We're just resigned to it all. There's nothing we can do.
Well, you know, it's only natural to feel that way, Chris, but I am here today to tell you that this is not the time to give up. We do have a choice. And my hope is that once you see what is coming, you're going to be able to sidestep the financial storm to protect your hard-earned resources and maybe even get payback with a few strategic investments that I will show you with the potential to hand you 250% profits or more.
All right. Well, I love the sound of that, Nomi. But before we go any further, how did you hear about this plan? I get you're a lot smarter than me. Have you seen this coming for a long time, or did this just recently pop up on your radar?
Great question. So I have been watching this plan unfold slowly over the past few decades, really. So first it was as a managing director at Goldman Sachs, and then as an author and investigative journalist, where I really started to uncover the life-changing ramifications of this massive looming overhaul. And I started to connect the dots and realize just the urgency of this scheme when I came across a single section in a bill submitted to Congress in the early days of the pandemic. So let's just connect the dots one by one.
Right. And this is the copy of the bill that you handed me earlier. This is the one that sort of vanished or got redacted or something.
Right. That is the full bill, exactly as it was written. So it's an early draft of a bill that was submitted by Nancy Pelosi, and it's called the Take Responsibility for Workers and Families Act. But a few days after it was introduced, it was quickly redacted. It was scrubbed from existence.
Yeah, right. Now, obviously there was something in it that wasn't supposed to be made public.
Right. So I don't know if one of her staffers made a mistake and forgot to remove it, or if they left it in there as a kind of warning. But take a look right there on page 314.
Right.
of the 1,000-plus page draft. In Section 101, direct stimulus payments for families.
I got it.
So let's just zoom into that page so that viewers at home can see what we're looking at here, what I'm talking about. So do you see the sections that I've circled?
That would be line 13, and I see the term digital dollar.
Right. So right there in plain black and white, Pelosi's plan calls for the creation of a new digital dollar along with a digital dollar wallet.
So this is right out of the same playbook that FDR, Nixon, and JP Morgan used.
Yep. Once again, the elites are planning a huge change to the very foundation of our financial system under the cover of another financial crisis. Same story, but honestly, Chris, and I hate to say it, but this time, the consequences, they're going to be tenfold.
Tenfold. So all the other resets that we talked about, that you've mentioned here, those other three just a few moments ago, seem pretty serious. Why do you think this one is going to be even bigger than that?
Well, I will show you exactly why in a minute, but first, I want to show everyone the elites playbook in action here. So let's go back to Nancy Pelosi's bill.
Okay.
So the digital dollar was presented as a useful way for Americans to receive future stimulus payments.
Right, and that seems reasonable.
Yeah, it does. But like I said a minute ago, Chris, in the final bill, there is no digital dollar language.
All right, so that's what they stripped out. But obviously that can't be where the story ends here.
No, of course not. Pelosi's bill was just the starting gun. Since then, an executive order from the White House has laid out a similar plan. With Executive Order number 14067, Joe Biden signed the dollar's death warrant. Most folks brushed it off as simply a law to regulate cryptocurrencies, and you can read it for yourself, though, directly from the White House.
So this executive order, as you call it, this is actively being carried out by the highest level officials in our government right now. So basically, what you're saying is the digital dollar didn't disappear accidentally. It was just a redirect.
That's what it was, right? But there is even more to it than that. Major American businesses are already building the infrastructure to usher in this cashless plan themselves right now. Folks who ignore the signs, they're going to soon be blindsided. While the mainstream media has Americans turning against each other and worrying about failing banks, inflation, and another election around the corner, the elites are using yet another financial crisis to reset the financial system. And they are hell-bent on winning this one at all costs. And that brings me to our next dot to connect, okay?
Another document?
Yes, two, actually. Two smoking gun documents. First, check out this one, which is a patent that was filed by a company that everyone has heard of, and it was founded by Bill Gates. Chris, I'll bet you can guess the company.
Well, it's got to be Microsoft.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. While many people notice their push into artificial intelligence, Microsoft is crossing over into a whole brand new industry. They just patented a cutting-edge technology that can sense things, and this is crazy, like a person's movement, body temperature, heart rate, eye activity, blood flow, maybe even our brain waves in order to track our body's activity and, this is the key thing here, transmit a digital currency wirelessly. And in case it's not immediately obvious to everyone watching at home here, I'm going to explain why this patent from Microsoft is so important in just a minute. But get this, Chris, this patent came out just 3 days after Pelosi's digital dollar bill came to light.
3 days. That's quite a coincidence.
You might say that, Chris, but when you see what I'm going to show you next, I think it's going to be apparent to everybody watching here that absolutely none of this was a coincidence at all. Take a look at the other patent that I brought with me tonight. It became public just weeks after the Microsoft patent.
Right. Another patent from Microsoft?
No, not Microsoft. This one was filed by Visa. And do you see the section that I've circled? Yeah, right there.
Right. Well, isn't that interesting? Can we zoom in? Let me show you exactly what I'm seeing here on this page.
Right, so you see what it says, right, Chris?
Yeah. It says digital fiat currency.
Right, and further down there, I've highlighted the most alarming section. And I quote, causes the removal of the physical cash from circulation in a fiat currency system. And if that weren't enough to raise your suspicion, take a look at Section 7 of that patent, just a few lines down. It says the removal of physical currency from circulation includes physically destroying the physical currency.
They're planning to physically destroy dollars.
Yes.
All right. So, Nomi, I'm seeing, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I'm not sure I understand here all the connections between the Visa and the Microsoft patents, Nancy Pelosi's new money plan.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So because also there's one more connection that we do need to make before we move on to the next dot.
Okay.
So see, Chris, that years ago, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, he pledged to give away his billions of dollars to charitable causes,
right,
including vaccine research, family planning, and aid for poor countries.
And I definitely remember hearing all about that.
Yeah. Sure, it was all over the news at the time. But I will bet that you haven't heard of one of Gates's lesser-known initiatives, and that one is called the Better Than Cash Alliance.
Better Than Cash. Interesting.
Right, and the goal of Gates's Better Than Cash Alliance, well, you can find that right on the website. It's this: to accelerate the global transition from cash to digital payments. It is right there in black and white.
Fascinating. Fascinating. But I'm not sure I'm making all the connections here.
That's all right. It's going to be more obvious when I show you who else is involved with Gates's Better Than Cash Alliance, because it includes some of America's biggest companies.
Mm-hmm. Firms we've all heard of.
Oh yeah, Chris, Citi's one of them that's involved. Ford, Coca-Cola, MasterCard, and of course, as we spoke about, Visa. And they're working with powerful organizations like the Clinton Development Initiatives, the United Nations, USAID, the Global Fund, UNICEF, and the United Nations Population Fund. In all, the Better Than Cash Alliance includes 80 world governments, many of the world's biggest companies, and major international organizations.
All right, so this is very far-reaching, this scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't exaggerating, Chris. Yeah. This is huge stuff. So are you starting to see why I am convinced that the events to come are going to be the biggest change to our money in the history of our country?
Yeah, well, thanks to you, thanks to Nomi Prins, I'm getting the picture widescreen right now, coming into focus.
When I show you that final dot, I think that the entire picture is going to become crystal clear. So, Chris, have you heard of an initiative called ID 2020?
Can't say that I have, no.
Okay, well, ID 2020, it's essentially the linchpin that's going to make the digital dollar switchover possible. It's a global partnership involving the Gates Foundation along with Microsoft, and last but not least, Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
More connections with Gates, Microsoft, the WEF, and all the wealthy elites out there. So that would explain why Microsoft, the patent you showed us a few minutes ago, is so important.
It is critical. They are all deeply involved with yet another organization that has ulterior motives under the cover of charity. From the ID 2020 website, their goal is to set the global standards for a personal digital ID that'll tie together e-passports, driver's licenses, debit and credit cards, transit passes, health records, all in a single digital ID. In other words, a digital ID that could tie our entire lives and all the information in them together. Because a digital dollar, it wouldn't be possible without the ability to identify every single user. So that's the final puzzle piece that must be in place before the Fed and the White House can flip the switch on the digital dollar and eliminate cash.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like this is bigger than just getting rid of cash.
It is so much bigger.
Yeah.
These powerful people are using their vast wealth, resources, and all of their government connections to eliminate cash and usher in the digital U.S. dollar, which I expect is going to be combined with a digital ID, health records, contact information, and just so much more. The entire financial system is on the verge of a shock unlike anything that we've seen in decades. And with every passing week, the dominoes, they're just falling faster and faster and faster.
Nomi, let me, if you don't mind, let me take just a minute and try and, we've been saying connect the dots. Let me do it one more time here for me and for everyone watching at home. I want to recap this. Dot number one is Nancy Pelosi's digital cash cover-up that you showed us, and the new digital cash executive order that's being carried out in the highest levels of our government as we speak. Then dot number 2 was the twin patents, Microsoft and Visa, along with Bill Gates's, the Better Than Cash Alliance. And they show us pretty clearly the government has the full support of some of America's biggest businesses out there. Then we've got dot number 3, which is ID 2020. That's a scheme being driven by Bill Gates and Microsoft, the WEF again. And that is to attach everyone's money to their identity via electronic passports.
That's it. At this point, Chris, I think it's really difficult not to come to one inescapable conclusion. The cash in your pocket is soon going to be replaced by an all-digital currency, a digital dollar. And American companies are already scrambling to prepare for the transition. McDonald's, for example, is experimenting right now with cashless kiosks. Starbucks has tested accepting only electronic payments at many of its locations, and this sign appeared at Whole Foods, owned by Gates' friend and fellow billionaire, Jeff Bezos. And here's one more interesting bit of evidence here. Airports and major event venues around the country are installing something called reverse ATMs. I am starting to see them literally everywhere I go.
Okay, hold on. Reverse ATMs. What does that mean?
So the NFL and Visa recently made this deal to go cashless at the Super Bowl, but there was a problem with their plan because many folks across America only use cash. So in the name of inclusivity, the stadium installed something called reverse ATMs to aid the unbanked.
Right. So how does it work?
It works just like a traditional ATM, but instead of putting in your card and getting cash out, you put cash in and it spits out a debit card with a digital credit.
I see. So kind of like FDR's gold exchange in a way.
Yeah, in a way, but reverse ATMs give fair value for your cash and nobody is required to turn in their cash.
Yeah, well, not yet anyway.
Right, not yet.
So they're installing these in airports and I think you said arenas across the country.
Yeah, airports, arenas, just about any place that people gather. This is a huge story and almost nobody's talking about it. But I think it's a key detail, a sign that this financial overhaul, it's imminent. It is happening right as we speak. And at this point, it's only a matter of time.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Nomi. Is there any way to stop this?
No, I don't think anything can stop it now. In my mind, this reset, it's sealed, it's done. In fact, the turmoil in the banking sector may leave the government with no other choice.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, take a look at this chart. Okay, it shows the unrealized losses of America's bank as of the end of 2022.
So, in other words,
hundreds of banks are insolvent. I saw a study a few weeks ago that found that hundreds of banks are at risk of failure. And economist Nouriel Roubini claims that most of America's banks, most of them, are in danger.
So where does the digital dollar come in then?
Well, Chris, do you know how much money it would take to make sure that every depositor in America is 100% protected? It would take more than $18 trillion. And do you know how much money the FDIC has in reserve to insure America's bank deposits? Just $119 billion.
Oh, okay. So that doesn't even begin to cover the bill.
Not even close. Do you remember earlier when I said that many Americans will actually beg for the digital dollar?
I do. I remember.
Well, bank failures could be that final catalyst, that nail in the coffin, because there's just not enough money to cover the deposits. But they'll have to do something. So I predict what they're going to do is they're going to convert America's bank accounts to Fed accounts managed and overseen directly by the Federal Reserve. And then they're going to replace dollar deposits in failed banks with the digital dollar credits. So you'll get a debit card to access your funds, but you won't be able to take out cash. And once the switchover is totally complete, nobody will.
And what about people who refuse to turn in their cash?
That is a fantastic question, Chris. And the truth is, Americans will soon have no choice. The government will likely manage the switchover the same way that the European Union does when a new country joins it. So they set an exchange rate for euros, and then they also set an expiration date for the country's old currency. They could even incentivize folks to turn in their cash with an exchange rate above face value, so it looks great. But for folks who still refuse to comply, and there will be many, they're going to need to set a deadline after which your cash could become worthless, a collector's item consigned to the dustbin of history. And according to officials at the Federal Reserve, this is all expected to become reality by the end of July with the rollout of FedNow, which is essentially the infrastructure underlying the digital dollar. And that's why you absolutely must prepare today, right now. As you saw, each time we have seen a reset to our financial system, unwary savers have been left holding the bag. And with lawmakers in every one of our states paving the way, loss of purchasing power isn't the only threat that we're facing here.
Oh, no. Well, what else is there?
Well, the new law that I just showed you, it authorizes the Federal Reserve to record and to track all transactions involving digital Federal Reserve notes. In other words, a new digital dollar combined with the removal of all physical cash from the system would mean the end to our financial privacy. Or worse, it could mean the end of freedom and liberty in America. Former Congressman Dr. Ron Paul explained it really well like this. It will also hand them total control over every part of our lives because every part of them touches money.
Yeah, surveillance and control. I have to say it. I don't want any part of that.
I don't either, Chris. It's not a good look. Orwell's 1984 was supposed to be a work of fiction, right? But this is truly a disaster. The digital dollar is going to hand the elites total control. The effects of this reset, they're limited only by our imagination. Because when they control all of the money, they will have the power of social control. The Fed even said so in a secret, not for public distribution white paper. It's Federal Reserve docket number OP 1670. Take a look at this. So soon they could use their newfound powers to prevent you from buying sugary snacks or cans of soda if by their standards you're a few pounds overweight. They could suspend your driver's license if you owe taxes. They could even prevent you from buying gas or a plane ticket if you refuse their latest health mandate. If you are deemed a threat for any one of those reasons or a whole host of new reasons that they might make up at any time in the future, then what's to stop them from locking you out of your bank and your retirement accounts entirely? Already, we are seeing this play out in places like China. They call it a social credit score. But like any technological change, it's not going to be bad for everyone. The Fed could choose to add money to your account, like Nancy Pelosi wanted to do with the distribution of pandemic stimulus checks.
Yeah, but if they can add money to it.
Right. You beat me to it, Chris. If they can add money, then the Fed could also reach in and take money straight out of your account.
Exactly.
Right. They could force you to share your retirement savings in the name of fairness and equality. Trillions upon trillions of dollars have been added to the Fed's balance sheet. And with the recent turmoil in the banking system, it appears that bill is now coming due. And I believe that folks who are successful and either earn a lot of money or keep a lot of money in their bank accounts, they could become the Fed's #1 target. I guess this could play out the way it did in Cyprus back in 2013, I think. The EU forced a bank there to capture almost half of depositors' money, right? That wouldn't surprise me at all. That's a perfect precedent. With the digital dollar in place, the Fed will almost certainly deploy a penalty on folks who keep a balance to stimulate spending, which could cost you 5% or more on your deposits. Imagine you open up your bank statement and you're watching your savings just to shrink every month, or collecting your paycheck or Social Security and being told, oh, spend it now or it's going to disappear next week. They could do that. Well, yeah, they could. The technology is already being discussed by the World Bank and it's being tested overseas. Nomi, I am trying to process everything that you're laying on us here. What we're talking about here is no ordinary disaster. No, it's not. And that's the problem. Most people, and I'm sure you're one of them, when they think about the next crisis, they can't help but think back to the last one. Right. A real estate crash, stock market collapse. Right, stuff like that. But the next crisis, it's going to be really different. Today, we are on the verge of a historic shift on par with the creation of the Federal Reserve, with Roosevelt's gold confiscation and with Nixon's shocking decision to decouple the dollar from the gold standard. For folks with more than $2,500 in the bank, it could be impossible to recover from this transformation of the American financial system. Look, America has seen 3 major resets to its financial system since 1907. But this time, the actual value of our money could be obliterated, and the function of our money, worse, is going to be fundamentally overhauled. Could I simply protect my savings by owning gold or silver, precious metals?
Or will other tangible assets out there be enough to get us through the worst of what's to come?
Chris, look, I am a huge fan of precious metals, but with the new digital dollar, just owning gold and silver is not going to be enough. You're still going to be exposed. So if you hope to emerge from this incredible upheaval with your nest egg intact, you're going to need to consider buying an asset that I've found that you can use to become your own banker, held privately outside the grasp of the legacy banking system. And many consider it an even harder asset than gold and silver, and without the headaches and the challenges of storage and transport.
Right. So I'm loving the sound of this. Are we talking about a commodity out there, or stocks and bonds, an options play maybe?
No, Chris, it's none of those things. It doesn't involve silver or gold or land. But it is simple to buy with just a few clicks on your computer. In fact, I think everyone should have at least $100 in this asset. It's something that I recommend to my close friends and family.
Right. It's easy to store.
Oh, yeah. It's as easy to keep as stocks. And if you're comfortable using a standard brokerage account, it's nearly as simple as buying and selling stocks on the NASDAQ. But I should caution, this particular corner of the market, it is volatile.
Okay, so definitely not the kind of investment that your advisor's going to tell you about here, but they don't tell you about anything outside of the mainstream anyway. It's too risky for them. Is that what we're getting at here?
Chris, you get it. Yeah, it's definitely outside of the mainstream. And in my opinion, that volatility, it's actually a feature, not a problem. No. Yeah, because in fact, the nature of this asset is why I consider it a near perfect investment for any American who does believe in the power of gold, as I do, to preserve wealth and the privacy and freedom of using cash. And here's the best part. It's not controlled by any central bank or country, which means it's almost completely decentralized from the hands of bureaucratic manipulation.
Right. So it preserves wealth, privacy, freedom. The only thing left is big gains. So is there potential for profit here, or is this just a store of value like gold would be only?
Well, in some ways it is similar to gold, but it's even better. I would be surprised if it didn't outpace gold and silver by a mile as the digital dollar is rolled out. I should caution though, Chris, there is a right way and a wrong way to buy it. If you buy it in the right way, it can preserve everything that you have worked your entire life to get. And that's why with each passing week, more and more people are putting a percentage of their savings into it.
That's if we do it the right way. But what about the wrong way?
Well, if you do it the wrong way, you will put every penny you own at risk. And you will be playing right into the hands of Bill Gates and the folks at the World Economic Forum. So I've just put together a brand new report to explain everything that you need to know. It's called the Escape Plan, how to become your own banker with the world's hardest asset. And in this report, I explain how to buy the world's hardest asset to escape the grasp of the legacy banking system, store the asset, which is really important, in a safe location away from the prying eyes of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., transport as much as you want everywhere that you go safely and securely. But this hard asset, it's only step one to prepare for this massive change to the entire financial system.
All right, well, we're getting some good news here. Nomi, I'm all ears. What's step number 2 then?
Okay, so throughout history, folks who've been able to see these financial shocks coming, they've had the opportunity over and over again to earn some massive profits. After the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, for example, the value of the dollar collapsed by more than 70% over the course of just the next decade. But between 1913 and 1920, investors who bought silver could have earned an incredible 120%.
120%. That's not bad considering the alternative. Holding cash would have lost, what'd you say, 70%? So.
Right. I mean, 120% gain instead of a 70% loss.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is a big win. But get this, the same exact thing happened again in 1933. When Franklin Roosevelt ordered the confiscation of gold, the government paid $20.67 for each ounce that was turned in. And then, as we talked about, with the stroke of his pen, he hiked that price up to $35, which was essentially stealing 69% of Americans' hard-earned savings. But meanwhile, investors who shifted some of their nest egg into home-stake mining right beforehand, they could have captured gains of 147% in just 2 years. In other words, instead of losing $3,100 on a $10,000 investment, folks that moved their money at the right time, they would have made more than $24,000. Let me show you one more example. So in 1971, Nixon crushed the dollar's value when he entered the gold standard, sending the price of everything from cars to houses to gasoline soaring. But once again, folks who were able to connect the dots, they could have turned a few ounces of gold into a significant nest egg with gains as high as 5,200%.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we might see a similar move for gold as the digital dollar is introduced. What do you think?
That is exactly what I see coming, Chris. You have read my mind. In fact, I have traveled thousands of miles and spent tens of thousands of dollars to find the truth about today's gold market. The world's biggest central banks are buying gold at record pace. And already gold is setting record highs in nearly every country. And soon I expect the same thing to happen in the United States. In fact, as the Federal Reserve prints more and more to shore up the financial system, I think that it's virtually guaranteed that gold will set new records in the days ahead. According to a report from the World Gold Council, a historic run on gold is already beginning as we speak right here, right now. As cash is confiscated and destroyed, honestly, Chris, I don't know if there has ever been a better time to buy gold than today. And I have found a company which is primed to profit from this in a really big way. And it's insulated from the chaos of everything that's going on by its remote mining locations. And I fully expect it to become one of the world's top performers over the next 12 months as this entire shift makes landfall. The firm I found, it's among the world's oldest gold mining companies, and it's been around for decades. So it's better than nearly every other miner at extracting the lowest cost gold in the entire world. But it gets even better, Chris, because over the last few years, this firm has set into motion this domino effect. It's structuring a cascade of deals that will put millions of ounces of gold into its vaults, and not only for the next few years, but for decades to come. So in other words, the time to buy is right now, and I cannot stress that enough. And that's why I have put all of the details inside a special report called the #1 Gold Stock for 2023 and beyond.
Well, I'm a bit of a gold investor myself, and I won't make any bones about it. I'd love to get a copy of that report before we're finished here today. No,
of course, and that's a very smart choice, Chris. I will be happy to send you a copy.
I appreciate it. I forced you to say yes while we're talking.
You got it.
Here, I put you on the spot. Can our viewers actually get a copy at home as well?
I am glad you asked on their behalf, Chris. Yes, everyone watching today is eligible to receive both of the reports that we have talked about here today. So the escape plan, how to become your own banker with the world's hardest asset, and the #1 gold stock for 2023 and beyond, when they sign up for a risk-free trial of my flagship research service called Distortion Report. And for everyone tuning in right now, this situation is so incredibly urgent that I'm going to offer a 75% discount on my research to everyone who sees this message.
Well, that's great. Now, do you also offer copies of your reports on, I don't know, Amazon or on your website, along with your best-selling books, maybe?
No, Chris, these reports will never be available on Amazon or anywhere else. It just wouldn't make sense. The research inside these reports is so timely and so actionable, it would be impossible for me to offer them at the same 75% discount that's available to all of our viewers here today. Plus, Amazon takes such a huge fee from every order, I'd probably need to charge at least $100 for each report if I offer them that way. Folks who sign up today for Distortion Report will not even pay half of that. I'm going to explain all the details in a minute, Chris, and I think you're going to be shocked when I reveal today's very special price. But before we talk about that, I do have one more report that I would really like to share with the audience.
Okay.
So as we've discussed, our entire financial system is being turned inside out. Every time crisis strikes, the folks in Washington and on Wall Street use every single tool at their disposal to rescue the system at the cost of responsible savers and of hard-working Americans.
Right, yeah. I remember, wasn't it Ronald Reagan, I think, who said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help."
Yes, Chris, you really are a student of history. I love that quote. And yes, Reagan said that back in 1986. And that is exactly what we have seen time and time and time again. Every single time financial disaster strikes, what happens next?
Well, the Fed steps in, right, with more printing or another interest rate adjustment.
Right. Take a look. But when you find out what's coming next...
Whoa, are you saying it's about to get even worse?
But we already talked about the effects of Nixon's decision to remove the dollar from the gold standard.
Right, and we're still dealing with the effects of that.
Right, and if this crisis in 2020 showed us anything, it's that the recent money printing has caused runaway inflation. And as we have seen, that can happen really quickly. But we're just beginning to see the full consequences of the Fed's most recent actions. See, as the Fed manipulates interest rates and prints more and more money, likely really quadrillions of dollars in the next few years, they will inevitably cause what I call distortions in the real economy.
Distortions? You mean something like bubbles?
Oh, like bubbles, crashes, wild price swings, all of it.
Okay.
The price of gold in 1933 was one example. When Roosevelt confiscated gold and paid $20.67 per ounce, and then immediately repriced it to $35 an ounce.
Right. Or how about when OPEC decides to produce less oil and the cost of gas soars, right?
Yeah, that's another terrific example of a distortion. Another example would be, like the cash for clunkers, which destroyed perfectly good cars and is still inflating the cost of used vehicles to this day. And now we are about to see perhaps the greatest distortion that we have ever seen. And this time, I expect the effects are going to be felt by every single American. Governments around the world are turning away from the dollar. Russia and China are now trading in the petro-red, and several countries around the world are banding together to overthrow the world's reserve currency. Now, to be clear, I don't expect the dollar to fall to second place anytime soon. In reality, Russia and China might as well be inventing a new language to replace English as the world's most spoken language. That's not going to happen, right? Not very quickly anyway.
Yeah, I'd certainly hope not.
But that doesn't mean that the dollar is completely safe either. The truth is we are in a currency war, and America's going to do whatever it takes to preserve the dollar's dominance. And what that means is more money printing, more interest rate manipulations, and more distortions in the market. Which
in turn is going to mean more volatility and more downside, but I suppose also more opportunities, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Chris. The months ahead, look, they're going to be confusing to the average person. But again, if you can see the bigger truth behind the headlines, then you can move your money into the stream of the quadrillions that are sloshing around our economy, and you can turn it into an enormous nest egg. The simple fact is this. The world is changing. But understanding that big picture and deciphering the truth behind all those hyperbolic, annoying headlines will be crucial to your success going forward. Those who can see that truth, they're going to do just fine, maybe even better than fine.
Well, what about those who can't?
Well, they could be left behind. But to help everyone watching see that big picture, I have put together a special 3-stock portfolio along with a third special report that goes behind the scenes of the currency war that's happening in the headlines, and it explains the truth that the media isn't gonna tell you. It's called the Unprintable Portfolio: 3 profit opportunities in the Fed's next major distortion. I love this report. In it, I show you 3 investments that are primed to soar as America protects the dollar's status. I can't reveal what they are here, but I have found 3 stocks with the potential to hand you major profits as the Fed distorts the markets like they have done over and over and over again in the last 20 years.
I got to say, Nomi, I would love to see that one too, and we're finished here. So how can viewers take action on that today?
So at this very critical moment in our history, you said the most important words, because the most important thing to do is take action. And if you don't mind, Chris, I'm gonna talk to the viewers at home for just a minute. So look, the truth is this. Historic shifts are upon us, and soon cash is gonna become a relic, a collector's item that's banished to the dustbin of history. And our financial system is being dismantled, and it's being reimagined behind the scenes away from us. But if you take a position in the right investments today, there is a chance that you're going to walk away wealthier than you ever imagined. But also, if you get into the wrong ones, your nest egg could suffer. And that's why I wanted to make this as simple as I possibly could for you, so that there is nothing standing in your way to position yourself on the right side of history. So today, I have put together a very special offer for viewers to get access to my research with a truly special discount. If you sign up right now, my team and I will send you immediately and by email every report that I have shown you here today. the escape plan, how to become your own banker with the world's hardest asset, the #1 gold stock for 2023 and beyond, and the unprintable portfolio, 3 profit opportunities in the Fed's next major distortion. And they're all yours when you try out my flagship investment letter distortion report. Now, if we made all the reports available on Amazon along with distortion report, we would likely charge $200, $300, even $500 a year or more to deliver the complete library of all of our fantastic back issues and important special reports. The new issue we publish every month, and the complete model portfolio of timely recommendations. But my goal is to expose these historic financial earthquakes so that the average person on the street knows what to expect before it's too late. And that's why the price of a 1-year subscription to a distortion report is ordinarily just $199. That's if you go to our main website. That's what you'll pay. But for today's audience, I am offering you 75% off today on that entire package. To make it as easy as possible to get started, we've set up a special page where you viewers can get everything that I have laid out today and the opportunity to try out Distortion Report for just $49 for an entire year. So I urge you to try it out. This is such an important time.
Absolutely. Now, is there any way for readers to see, I don't know what you call it, maybe a preview of these reports before they buy?
No, that just wouldn't be fair to the tens of thousands of folks who already paid to follow my work. But here's what I will do. If within the first 60 days you decide Distortion Report it's not the right fit for your worldview and your investment goals, that's perfectly okay. Just let my friendly Florida-based customer service team know, and we will send you a refund for every penny.
Nomi, this is great. It basically sounds like there's zero risk here.
Right, and that is something that I think is so important. It's the best way for me to show you who I am and what my research is all about, with virtually no risk. Now, I want to leave everyone here tonight with a final thought. We are about to witness the greatest financial shift in the history of America. The way that we spend, the way that we save, invest, and borrow, it's being changed forever. As an investigative journalist, I have spent decades exposing historic market events. I accurately predicted the mortgage crisis of 2008 and 2009, years before it unfolded, the COVID crash. And in my best-selling book, All the President's Bankers, I exposed all of the corrupt ties between America's banking system and the powerful figures in the Oval Office. And in my best-selling book, Collusion, I exposed the way in which the world's major central banks colluded with the Fed and international governments to rig the world and the monetary system. And like those massive stories, what we are seeing today, it is so historic that I am certain we are going to be talking about this moment for the next 50 years or more. Our entire financial system is about to be turned completely on its head. The days, weeks, and months ahead, they're going to inevitably bring more confusion and more chaos. But if you take the right steps today, you'll not only shield yourself from the worst of that, you will find out how you can set yourself up to create foundational wealth for many years to come. So please, I urge you, click that button below so that we can get started now.
And Nomi, it only remains for me to say thank you very much for being with us. That was very powerful.
Well, thank you for having me on, Chris. And to everyone at home, thank you so much for watching.
And again, folks, for the rest of the story and instant access to Nomi's research, all you've got to do is click that button below and you can get started right now.